If you're looking for ways to loosen up, create depth, and keep your colors bright, stick around and I'll show you how I created these two on paper. Hello and welcome. This is Betty with Betty Frank's Art. So glad you can join me today. Let me start off by telling you that I had a little bit of technical difficulty with this video, and the issue that I had was, do you see my water can jar up at the top there? Can you see that light reflecting off of the water that is in there? Well, what I discovered after about 20 minutes of troubleshooting is that when I hit my table, which unfortunately this is a folding table, when I hit my table, it kept moving my water around and it kept reflecting that light into the camera. So there are parts of this video where there is reflection, and you can see it here, and it looks like kind of a strobe light effect. So I apologize in advance. It's not throughout the whole video, but at the beginning I noticed it was more so than towards the middle and later parts, especially this part here where I am adding some Neocolor 2 crayons and I'm moving my table a lot. So again, I apologize for that. You can skip forward if you want to skip through this part. So the way I like to start my paintings is I like to start with a pencil, and that's the first marks that I put down just to kind of loosen up a bit. And then when I'm working on paper, I love adding these Neocolor 2 colors. They're crayons and they're water soluble, so these will move around when I put down some gesso or I put down some color on top. Now let me start by saying that these two pieces, there are 5 by 7 inches, and I had already put down a layer of gesso and I let that dry. So I was ready to go when I started recording this. So I'm just putting down some color. It doesn't matter where I put it because this is all going to get covered up and it's not going to show. But when I scratch through my paint, little bits and pieces of the Neocolor 2 are going to show. So I sped this up, but here I am. I'm working on plastic. It's 4 mil, the number 4 mil. And when the paint dries, I like to peel it back. So here I zoomed in a bit so you can see my color choices. I'm using Nova Color paints, and I've got a link to them in my information down below, and I'll put it in the first comment as well. So I've got carbon black, I've got a number of different colors, and here I'm going to switch out one of them. I like using the quinacridone red. I think I had quinacridone magenta before, but I kind of like the red a little bit more so than the magenta. I mean, I love them both, but you know, they produce a slightly different color. So I like to start with black, and then I realized, wait a minute, I didn't finish my whole mark making process. And this is where I just like to put down a whole bunch of different marks using pencils. So I like using Prismacolor pencils. I was also using a Stabilo Woody, the kind of thicker one. I think this one here is a Stabilo Woody as well in the blue. And I am chatting with friends on Zoom, so that's why my hands were being very animated at that point. So again, you can see my light is reflecting off of my water, and not happy with that. So I did, over the weekend, after I realized all this, I did get a new table to put in my studio. It's a used table, and it's funny because it already has a ton of paint on it. Somebody was getting rid of it, but it's a really nice, sturdy wood table. So I won't have this issue in the future when I am videotaping. So I'm excited to get that all set up and add some more lighting as well. All right, so I finished putting down some of the black, and I'm peeling while I multitask here. So drying that layer, and I'm also peeling off the paint off of this plastic. And I like to use the same plastic. I don't want to add more plastic to the landfill. So I just peel this back as it dries and just clear up some area. Now, if I was just painting for myself, I wouldn't even bother doing this, but because I want to show you guys some of the colors I'm going to be using, I want to peel back some of the previous colors, so not to get them all confused. As you can see, I didn't do a super great job. It works better when I've got like, 4 layers of paint, and then it peels really well and I can get all of it clear. But this time I only had like maybe 1 or 2 layers there. So here I am getting my gesso ready. I've got a Liquitex bottle, but inside this bottle is Nova Color gesso. I kept the bottle because I love the squeeze bottle and I love the size of it, and I use a lot of gesso for my white. So I'm constantly pouring it out on my palette like I'm doing here, although it's still stuck. All right, there we go. No, I never clean up after I use stuff, so it does tend to get stuck a bit, and I just clear that off. Now that I've got the black dried, we can move on to using some colors here. So I'm going to start off with some warm colors, and then I'm going to switch to some cooler colors. And the reason I love to do that is because I like to keep my colors nice and clean, meaning I don't want to create mud. And if I was to mix my warm colors with my cool colors, I would be creating mud. So, and let me backtrack a bit. I was going to start with my warms, and then I decided that I want to finish with warms. So I'm going to start with some cool colors. So that's why I put out that teal, and I've got some blue out there. And here's some green. So just kind of putting out a few of these colors. We'll get to that pink a little bit later. So I'm using a variety of different brushes. I just grab whatever brushes are at the local craft store and try those out. This is probably like a number 4, I want to guess, something like that, or 6 possibly. But in terms of brushes, I really recommend that you just buy a number of different brushes. They have round, filbert, flat, and see what you like best. I like using a variety of different brushes, so I've got some flat, some round, some filberts. I also use a script brush. I'll show you that a little bit later. So I think it's important to experiment and try a variety and see what works for you. Not just because I'm using a certain one doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to like it. I think it's a very individual thing. I'm putting down different marks. This is how I like to get started. I have no vision in mind of what the end is going to look like. This is just putting down different shapes. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I am inspired by fields of flowers. So my shapes tend to be representative of flowers. So stems, the circles, but I also love, nature. I love different shapes in nature, so trees. I also love fences, and especially fences that are falling down. So old fences, I love. Stepping stones, those show up in my paintings as well. So a variety of different shapes that I like to use. Now, you may also love nature, but maybe you also love the city and the cityscape. So maybe you love lines that are, my lines tend to be very much round, and very rarely do I have really sharp edges. I tend to soften them out. But for cityscapes, maybe you love, the hard edges of the architecture, and you have more squares or more angles. So maybe that's something that you love. So when you're creating abstract, it tends to be more of something obviously abstracted, but also, for me, I'm painting from my heart and what I love. And I love flowers, and I love fields of flowers, and I love nature. So those show up in my paintings. So if you're getting started on your journey and you want to do abstract art, but you're trying to figure out, what is it that you're trying to create, then consider thinking about what it is that you really love. What is it that you are noticing when you are out and about? I mean, just the other day I was driving in my car and I was looking up at the hills, and I'm in California, San Jose, California. So we've got a lot of golden hills around us. And I was looking up at the hills, and it just made my heart sing. I just love the hills and seeing the trees up there. I also love it when I can see cows up on the hillside. So when you're out and about, whether you're in your car or taking a subway or on your bike, think about what's making your heart sing and start making a list of those things, whether subconsciously you're starting to make a list or, make a list on your phone, make a list on a piece of paper. And I think those types of things are going to help move you closer to expressing yourself and understanding what it is that you're trying to express. So at this point, I am continuing to add colors. These are a lot of dark colors, right? And you're going to see as I progress through this that it's really dark. But then at the end, I lighten it up in quite a few areas. And I do that a couple of different times. So to me, it's important that I look at values when I'm creating, but I don't do that in the beginning. In the beginning, I'm just staying loose, having fun, putting down marks, and not having any expectations until well into it, maybe halfway point or a little bit further. This is a yellow medium, cadmium yellow medium. I like that color. Works really well. And this is, I think this one's the organic orange, I want to say. Not 100% sure there. I don't pay attention to, the exact colors that I'm using. It's more of a feeling, what am I in the mood for? And I just grab those colors. Now I love these small 4-ounce jars. These are great for when I'm working small and I'm sitting at my table. So I've got 2 studios. This is my garage studio, and I've got a table in here where I can sit and do smaller pieces. I can also do large art, and I did for a number of years before I started renting a studio in downtown San Jose, which I absolutely love that studio space. It is a large space, and it is not packed with a bunch of stuff. I love the feeling when I'm there because it's very much wide open, and I have space to create large pieces and move them around and not have the clutter of stuff being stored. Like in this garage studio, I also have shelves of old photo albums and what else? Some Christmas supplies, Christmas decorations, things like that. So in this studio, it tends to feel a bit more crowded. And last week, when I say we, my best friend's daughter is so fabulous. She knows how to declutter and organize, and she keeps me on track. And we did a ton of work last week in my garage studio, and more than half of it has been cleared out and cleaned up, and I've got so much more space in there now. We still have the other half to do, which is the half where I am sitting and creating. So that's coming up next. So I've switched over to my warm colors, and I wanted to make sure that my cool colors were dry before I started working with the warm colors. Otherwise, I would be creating mud. Now, mud is okay when you're looking for some neutral colors, and neutral is great when you're working with bright colors. But I wanted to not do that just yet. I wanted to keep my colors bright and happy for as long as possible before I add in some neutrals. So that's why I've got them separated out on my palette. That's why I like to put that line of gesso so that my brush isn't dipping into where I was using my cool colors. Again, still keeping really loose. I've got, I'm trying to add some more angles to my painting, meaning I tend to do a lot of stuff that is up and down as opposed to horizontal. So I was trying to add some lines that were a little bit more horizontal. Just kind of balance it out a bit and not have everything be up and down, top to bottom. This is a script brush that I was talking about earlier. I love the script brush. It's got long bristles on it, and it's also called a rigger. And I just love that it can make smaller marks. It makes these wonderful circles. I also use it kind of as a brush. I'll use the side of it as a brush, which I don't think it's meant for that purpose, but I did that once and I just love the way it kind of skims over some areas. That way some of the paint underneath is still peeking through. So by no means do I use my brushes always in the appropriate way. See, like right there, I'm kind of using the side of the brush to fill in a little bit of that area. So we're going to hit it with the dryer. And I think I missed this one. I try to speed up most of these where I'm using the dryer, and I totally missed this one, but that's okay. It doesn't take me too long to dry the piece. Now these 5x7s are available to folks who are on my email list. So if you're interested in purchasing one, I have them available through a release. So I create a whole bunch of pieces on paper, 5x7 and also 9x12, sometimes a little bit larger. And then I send it out in an email to the folks on my email list, and they get first dibs to purchase before I put it on social media. And since I started doing this last year, to be honest with you, it never makes it to social media because they sell out pretty quickly. So if you're interested, just join my email list. I'm going to include a link in the show notes below, also include a link in the first comment below so it's easy for you to find. Now here I'm doing drips. I love doing drips because I love stuff in my paintings that I don't have control over. So, and drips is one example of, not having control over where those drips go. I'm going to hit this with the dryer so that we can move on to the next step. Here we go. I sped up this portion of it. Drips take a little bit longer to dry with that much water on them. And I'm kind of picking up some of the water with a paper towel. And I sometimes like to do that also because what happens when you do that is the paint that was underneath, it kind of picks up the wet paint, and then it leaves a really cool mark with the paint underneath. Again, something you just got to play around and experiment with. Since it's dry, I am kind of starting like I'm starting all over. I am putting down marks again because those initial marks, more likely than not, you are not going to see any of those initial marks. That's just part of my process of loosening up and getting started. So here I'm adding some more, and some of these will show up in the final layer. So I'm bending it back a bit with all of the paint going on them and the spray from my water bottle. They're not really warped that much. You can see they're not, and this is also kind of my way of thinking about what I want to do next. I tend to pick up my paper and kind of bend it back a bit. So, and I think at this point I'm actually talking with 3 of my other artist friends that I'm on Zoom with. So it's my way of just transitioning to the next thing that I want to do. So I'm looking for another brush just to, change things up a bit. This is a round brush. Not sure if I end up using that one or a smaller one. Since I'm working small on paper like this, yeah, I think I'm grabbing a smaller brush here. So yep, that one is more appropriate for the size that I've got. And then I dip it into my water to wet it a little bit so that the paint doesn't get stuck right onto the bristles. It kind of floats on the bristles. Now, if you've seen some of my videos where I'm working really large on canvas, you know that I'm working with much larger brushes. So those tend to be anywhere from 10, 12, 14 size brushes. And those as well I have in a variety, so in a round, flat, and filbert, so that I have a variety of large marks as well. So here I've got a little bit more lightening up some areas. So you can see the painting is really quite dark, but if you remember what they looked like in the beginning, there was quite a few lighter areas. So now I'm starting to come in and add some lighter areas. So looking at my values, everything is really dark right now, so what can I do to lighten up some areas? And by lightening up, I don't mean go directly to your white and only your white. I shouldn't say never, I very rarely put down white that is just white. I tend to have, maybe I'll use whatever paint was left on my brush. As you can see, I rarely wash my brush. I mostly wash it between warm colors and cool colors, or if I feel like I've just got too much on my brush, I'll wash that off and start again. But see how I took, the pink, now I've dipped right into the yellow to make more of an orangey color. So this is how I like to mix my colors as I go. And that creates harmony in your colors as well. So those marks there, those represent my love for stepping stones. And here's the script brush again. Now, if you don't have a script brush, you can certainly use, a very small, maybe like a number 2 brush. It's probably somewhat similar, but I just love the script brush also because you can't control it as much because of the bristles being so long, that it just adds a different type of mark. A little less controlled, I guess. So balancing out, the marks that I can control and I do control versus the ones that are less controlled. Now what I did was I took that red and dipped it into the blue that I was using earlier and made a purple. Another great thing to think about is if you're just getting started, there are so many paint colors to choose from, and I know it's hard to decide what colors. You really don't have to purchase every single color. Like, you don't have to purchase purple because you can create your own purple. Having yellow, blue, and red, you can create a whole array of colors. Now, having these extra colors is always great too, but if you're just getting started, stick with some basic colors. So pick a favorite yellow, a favorite blue, a favorite red, and then from there you can start adding more colors. Like green, I like to really create my own green. Adding a touch of black to my yellow creates this beautiful green, and then if I do it with a little bit of yellow and blue, again creating a different type of green. Here I'm adding some more white to that purple and lightening it up. I think part of creating art like this, I get more excitement sometimes out of the colors that I create than I do of the actual piece that I created. There's just, to me, so much joy in mixing these colors myself instead of pulling them directly out of the jar. And the other thing, when you're pulling it directly out of the jar, the colors are not harmonized, they're not working together. But see how I'm constantly dipping one color into the next? These colors are being harmonized as I put them on paper. And what that means, to harmonize, what that means is that these are all working together. They all have a little bit of each other in them, and they work together. Now, if you're just pulling colors directly out of a jar, then those colors have not been harmonized and they don't necessarily work well together. I did speed up this video just a tiny bit, not a whole lot. And the reason I originally did speed it up a whole lot more, but because of that flickering that was happening, I found that if I slowed down the video, the flickering wasn't as bad. Like right now, you can't see much flicker. And I think that's because my water is pretty dirty at this point, and it's not reflecting up into my camera as it was in the very beginning when my water was really clean. So I'm continuing to add layers. I've lost count how many layers we've done here, but it's a process of just building up layers until I get to a point that I am in love with the piece. And at this point, I am thinking about composition. So I'm looking at, those four there that I added, those four circles, balancing that with those marks down below. I'm looking at composition in terms of color and balance, color and marks to create balance. The one on the left, you can see it's a whole lot lighter at the bottom than it is at the top, so I'll come back in and address that. The one on the right that I'm working on right now is still way dark, much darker than I want it to be, but that's okay. It'll get there. If you're enjoying this video, I would so appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, hit the bell so that you can receive notifications when I put out another video. And I just appreciate your support. So you're supporting me by subscribing and also by giving me a thumbs up. By doing that, it lets YouTube know that you like this video, you find interest in it, and then it'll serve it up to your fellow artist friends that are out there, and they're going to get a chance to see it as well. Now, one interesting thing is, well, I don't know if it's interesting. I think a challenging thing for a lot of folks is when they finish a piece, it's naming it. And I know that I have often been challenged with coming up with names for all my pieces. And I create a lot of artwork, especially when I'm creating small artwork. I don't like to use the title Untitled and with a number following it. I think each piece deserves a title. Each piece has a story behind it. Each piece is easily or more easily identified with a title as opposed to an untitled number, 221. So one of the ways that I come up with titles is when I hear something that piques my interest and that I think would make a good title, I write it down, usually on my phone. I have a notes area just for titles, so I'll jot it down there. Another way is if I'm reading something and there's a couple of words in a sentence that are strung together that I really like the sound of them, I will write that down. Let's see, what else? So if I hear something, if I read something, if I get really stuck, what I'll do is I will Google poems. I'll Google poems about gardens or nature, and I don't take like a full line out of a poem. What I do is I string together a couple of words in that poem. So maybe on the first line there's a word I like, and the fourth line there's a word that I like, and maybe the last line. And on occasion there might be two words next to each other that work well and I really like them. But I'm being respectful of the person who wrote the poem, the author, and I don't want to, be taking um, their art. So, but I'm inspired by certain words that they're using, and then I try to string together my own um, words to create a title, if that makes sense. So that's one way that I do it. And then I guess the last way is just if somebody says something about my art that just sounds like it would be a good title, I do that. Oh, and one other way, if I'm really desperate or I just want to have some fun, is I will post it um, on social media and say, looking for a title for this one. And people are great. They come up with so many fabulous titles. And I know with this last one, I did a large piece. It was a 48 by 48, mostly blue. I didn't use a whole lot of color in that one. And I was trying to come up with a title and couldn't think of one, so I posted about it. And after reading about, I don't know, 60 different titles, one of them stuck out, which was the song Blue Bayou. And I ended up titling it Come What May. The person suggested Come What May, and then in parentheses wrote Blue Bayou. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. And I sent that person some of my art postcards as a thank you. So for these two pieces here, you're going to see towards the end, I hold them up to the camera so you can get a better view. And I'm on a Zoom session with my artist friends. And what they said was, Betty, it looks like you're doing a peace offering, because I'm holding them up under my hand, and it's like I'm doing a peace offering. So I ended up titling them both Peace Offering 1 and Peace Offering 2. So that's another example of how I come up with my titles. Now here I am trying to lighten up some areas. My hands are a bit animated because I'm chit-chatting away, but I'm also creating at the same time. So you can see I'm adding some much lighter colors. I've got some gray in here. I love gray as my neutral, instead of always using white, or I don't really care for cream as my neutral so much, but gray is one of those colors I really enjoy as a neutral. So again, you can buy gray in a bottle, or you can just add just a touch of black to your white. And also I like to keep whatever color I've got on my brush to mix into that, so that again, it's not just a black and white neutral, but it's got just a touch of color in it from either my warm colors or my cool colors. So here we're definitely warming up the piece. And I like to flip my brush over and make marks, especially as we get closer to the end, because it'll show the colors underneath. And then I brush that away a little bit so that it's not, they're not perfect marks. They're kind of pushed back a bit. So I'm really loving how it's now lightening up, and the lighter areas next to the darker areas add so much more drama and contrast, and I like that. But on this one, you can still see I've lightened the bottom a whole lot more than I've lightened the top areas. So it still needs work, but it's getting there slowly. So as I mentioned, I did speed up this video just a little bit, but I do tend to work pretty fast. I don't like to overthink any area. I just put, color over color over color until I get to a point where it's all working together. I mentioned that I'm using Nova Color paints, which I absolutely love their paints, and I'll include a link down below if you are interested in trying them out. Like I mentioned, I love the 4-ounce size, and I've always tested out each color buying the 4-ounce size before I purchase larger, the pint or the quart sizes. I'm also going to include a link because I get questions about what colors I like to use, and folks who are just getting started often ask me, well, which colors should I buy first? So I created a page of the basic colors that I like to use, and I'm going to include a link to that as well. If you're liking my style of art, you can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I post there almost every day. And I like to post in stories as well on Instagram, which also are on Facebook. I find stories on Instagram to be so much more fun than posting into my feed. So I tend to do that throughout the day. I made some green using that yellow and the blue, so it's kind of a little bit, I did put down some brighter green earlier, didn't I? Can't see it, it's kind of off camera here. So using a touch of that probably as well. That was I think it was a yellow green, which I don't like directly out of the jar, but when I mix it with a little bit more yellow, I really like that color. So here I am doing a little thinking about where to go next. I'm trying to make a gray and I put way too much black. I always do that. I dip into the black way too much. Okay, and that looks like a blue color. I think I'm trying to make a darker gray. I think what I was looking at was that bottom area was just too light all the way across it, so I wanted to bring in something darker down there. So again, looking at values and making sure that I've got dark areas and light areas. Still feel like I've got way too much dark. Tapping my fingers, trying to figure out where to go next. You know, sometimes it helps, you know, when I'm working on these small pieces, they go pretty quickly. But certainly when I'm working on larger pieces, it really helps to leave them alone for a day or so, come back to them, take a photo of it, look at it in the photo, and where your eye goes immediately is usually where I know I need to address any issues in that area. But when I'm working on them nonstop, I'm constantly looking at them, and so I'm not coming to them with fresh eyes to be able to decide what needs to be done. Now, I didn't speed up this video purposely, even though I've got the heater out because the dryer out, because I was multitasking and I was painting at the same time while I was trying to dry certain areas of it and so that I can move forward. Again, not wanting to mix colors and make mud, wanting the colors to stand out. I love the California sunshine during the summer months because these pieces dry very quickly. I rarely have to use the heating tool, and I know some folks don't like that because it dries out too fast, but for me, because I tend to work pretty fast, I get really impatient and I need it to be dry so I can move on. Now, overall, these two pieces I think took me from start to finish about 2 hours, I want to say. So here I'm using just a smaller brush to make these dots. Now I feel like I'm coming a little bit more towards the end. That's why I'm doing some of these finer marks. If I did these early on, which sometimes I do, they often get covered up. So I was feeling it needed more light areas. And again, it's not pure white, it's got a little bit of color in it. Now, recently somebody asked me if I get bored painting in this style. And I've been painting in this style since 2018. And my immediate response was, well, no. But I thought about it a little bit, and sometimes I have this little bit of a desire to try something different. But when I do that, I just feel like it's not really coming from me and it's not coming from my heart. And I know that's partially because I haven't practiced it enough and I'm not comfortable enough with it. But when I create like this, I create from my heart. And to me, this comes pretty, I don't want to say easily, but it kind of flows out of me. It is a process. This isn't a painting where, I say, oh, this is, I don't envision in my head this is what it's going to look like in the end. So I love the journey of creating these pieces, kind of like the journey of going out on a hike. You start in one spot and you go out on a hike and you spend an hour or two out there, and it's you're taking in the scenery, and it's all part of the journey, and you're enjoying every part of it. And that's how I see my paintings, is enjoying every part of it. Now, am I getting bored painting like this? No, I'm not, because there are so many variations that I can do, and I love them all, even though some folks say, well, they all look very much the same. Yes, that's because that's my style. This is the type of style that I paint in, and most people will recognize my style of painting because I've been doing it for so long. But I don't get bored because I cannot duplicate what I'm creating today. There's no way I can duplicate this because of the number of layers in there, the different brushes that I've used, the mixing of all the different paints. I can't remix all those paints ever again because, like what I'm putting down right here, this blue has a little bit of the red in it that I was just using, or the pink that I was just using. So to me, all of that is just unique and exciting and fun. And I don't get bored at all. I truly, truly enjoy creating this way. And someday, if I get to that point where I am bored and I'm not enjoying this anymore, then that'll be my cue to look for something else, to try something different. But until then, I'm just going to keep doing what I love, and this is what I absolutely love doing. So I am coming towards the end because you can see I've got smaller little marks that I'm doing, and those most likely will not get covered up. But I will tell you right now, those ones I just did up above on that white, I think I end up covering up. But you can still see them a little bit through the paint. I also have a list of my favorite art supplies, and that's going to be in the show notes, and also I'll include the link in the first comment below in this video. So I'm liking where these are heading. They're not quite there yet, but they're not dark like they were earlier. Remember how dark they were? So they're definitely getting lighter, but I end up lightening them up just a bit more. So last year in 2020, I spent more of my time creating, well, not more of my time. I uploaded more of my videos of me creating on large canvases. And this year I'm going to kind of balance that out. I'm still going to be doing some of the large canvas paintings, but I'm going to be uploading a lot more of these smaller pieces that I like to work on as well. Kind of balance that out with the large canvases and the smaller pieces. I know not everybody creates on large canvases like I do, like in the videos that I've provided. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on something a little bit more doable for a lot of folks, which is creating on paper. And creating on paper really was my first love. When I started creating mixed media art, I started on paper, and I've learned that on paper I tend to be a lot more free and loose and more willing to, really try a lot of different things. And I'm working small on paper, so I'm seeing results a lot faster than working, let's say, a 36 by 36 or a 60 by 60, where, it's over a series of days and many hours that I start to see results. But when I work on paper small like this, I love it because you get results a lot faster and you just feel like you've accomplished something, and you've got this wonderful little gem that just it makes me happy. So that's what I love about creating on paper. And there's that whole thing about, when you get to a canvas, you treat it like it's so precious because I've spent all this money on this canvas. I want to create something spectacular. I need to create a masterpiece on it. And then what happens with me is, subconsciously, I'm now not creating loose. I'm not creating nice, freely, because I'm so worried about creating something wonderful on this canvas that I spent a lot of money on. But with paper, I found that it's just a piece of paper. It didn't cost very much at all. And that's a whole shift in the mind. And that's where I think I got really comfortable working on paper. And then I was eventually able to create on canvas very much like I do on paper, staying loose, staying free, and not treating it like it's so precious. So if you're feeling that way yourself, give that a try and spend more time working on paper. There's so many different sizes of paper. 9 by 12 is, one of my smallest sizes that I like to work on. But I also create on 9 by 12. I've got 11 by 14. I've got 14 by 17 and 18 by 24 inch paper. So a variety of different sizes. I'm trying to figure out what to do with that middle section there. I started with making marks, but decided, well, I'm just going to fill it in instead. Because sometimes I feel like I've got too many marks that, like I mentioned earlier, that are up and down, that are vertical, and I feel like, when I get a little bit too much of that, then I need to start adding some horizontal lines. And I think that just adds some more interest to the piece. Here I'm trying to add, again, a little bit more vertical and not just, I'm sorry, more horizontal and not just vertical lines. Getting my vertical and horizontal all mixed up, just like I get my left and right all mixed up. So I'm doing a little filling in here. Filling in those little circles I did earlier. So I'm looking for balance. I'm looking for large shapes and small shapes. I want to have interest by not having everything the same size. So I'm going to do some things that are really small and some things like these dots right there. Those are probably my smallest size dots. And then I'm going to have some larger areas, or larger mark making, I should say. It's kind of fun working on two pieces at once. You can, play one off the other, figure out, if you're looking at these, they don't look identical in any sense of the word, other than the colors being used. But you can play off each other and not get stuck with just one and trying to figure out where to go with one. So I'll often, when I'm feeling done with one, I'll skip over to the other one and see what I can do over there. So just going back and forth. Okay, so I have dried this and I think I'm kind of done. See, I'm holding them up for you so you can get a better view. And I'm going to figure out, okay, so sorry, a little dark spot there. Okay, and we're back. And this is, I'm not sure if it was the same day or a different day, but I noticed some things about it that I wasn't crazy about. I was thinking it was done, but now I'm thinking it wasn't done. So I like the orange on the one on the right, so I'm going to come in and add orange on the one on the left. It needed a bit more of a focal point. I felt like the one on the left didn't really have much of a focal point. And again, when I'm creating these pieces, the focal point is really all over the place. And did you notice the one on the right is upside down? I wonder at what point do I flip that over? I think I figure it out at some point that it was upside down. Hard to tell with my pieces, right? They work either way. So filling in that orange, I think I added quinacridone red to it, kind of darken that orange color a bit. All right, coming in with a lighter orange. There we go. I did figure it out, and now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should do it upside down. And then I decided, nah, I think I do like it this way. Oh, wait, I will flip it over one more time eventually. There we go. Now, one thing these two pieces have in common is they both have that blue area in the upper left corner, but that's okay. Sometimes these pieces will sell together, sometimes more often than not, they sell separately. So it's okay to have it that way. So I'm going right over some of the things that I did before where it's already dried. Now, I usually say that you just got to keep going until you really love it. And clearly, when I thought I was done, I needed a break from it to really come back to it with fresh eyes. And that's why I'm back at it, adding more to it. Now, was it okay the way it was before? Sure, it was okay, but I think it definitely could have used a little bit more. And I really like on the left the orange that I added. I think that added a lot more to it. Now I'm flipping between the colors because I'm kind of towards the end now, and I'm being careful not to make mud unless I want kind of a neutral color. And as I mentioned before, neutrals are great next to bright colors because they're going to really make your bright colors stand out even more. Now that teal that I used in the middle of the left one, I then added some white to it so that I could add some of that color down below. I try to not use the exact, I don't know if the term is hue or tint, but I try not to use that same exact color. Somewhere else I try to either lighten it or darken it, and I think that just adds some more interest. It ties it together, but it's not the exact same color in, you know, in different places on the piece. And notice how I hold the script brush way back so that I've got some really loose circles going on. They're not perfectly round. And with the script brush, I just love that I can make those really tiny marks. And now I'm adding color, but I'm kind of blending it in a tiny bit. And there I've lightened that color a bit, or I think I added, that looks like the blue-green color. All right, so adding some larger elements to the one on the left, because I felt like it just needed something in that lower corner. And I am breaking up those lines so that it looks like it's not all floating at the very top layer by pushing away some of those, you know, rubbing out some of those lines that I just put on. It pushes some parts of it and it seems like it's underneath the other colors, if that makes sense. There we go. So now I'm thinking I am done. And I'm back, and notice my lighting is different, and this is a different day. So we're going to get some flickering again because I don't have dirty water, and I have different settings on my lighting. It's a social light, and I don't like this lighting I discovered, and I'm not sure which one I used on this day, but it's kind of a cooler light. So again, I'm going to apologize for the flickering that's going to happen here as the table moves. My water in my can there is moving. Okay, so I came back to this, and I do know that this is a different day, and I decided that it just needed a lot more light areas. I didn't like that it was still feeling pretty dark. I didn't feel like I had enough contrast happening in a variety of areas. So I got out the blue that I was using before, and I'm just using a tiny bit of that blue mixed in with the gesso, the white. So going over my light areas. So if you're not sure, you know, what areas you should lighten, what I like to do is wherever I already have a light area, I'm going in and making it even lighter. And wherever I have dark areas, I like to go in and make those even darker. And that helps you with using that full 10 point scale of your values. So the really light and the really dark. Those dots there were creeping up too close to those three middle white ones, so I wiped back a few of those. So I'm trying to figure out what to add over here. I felt like it needed a lighter area on that upper right corner. But I've already got some dots there. So it's it's trying to balance out, do I want to add more dots, which works because it's kind of a continuation of those kind of tealish colored ones that I already had, but just in a white color now. When I'm adding all of the lighter areas, again, I'm trying to balance that out, and I want the eye to move around the piece so that it's not kind of stuck in just one area. And sometimes that means putting down paint, deciding, is that working? Is it not working? Do I leave it? Do I take it out? Do I lighten it? Yeah, that wasn't working. Take it out. Try it again. Different, kind of pointing a different direction. And then removing parts of it so that it wasn't floating on top. I've got the script brush or the rigger, making some smaller lines. This is all the fine tuning, the final details. And then once this is done, I'm going to dry this part of it and I'll go into my final mark making, which I like to do at the beginning, in the middle stages, and then also at the very end. And doing these small dots is kind of like mark making, but when I say mark making, I'm going to be using different pencils. All right, so now I'm thinking this is probably done, although I think I'm chit-chatting over there. I could have edited this out. Didn't realize that I had paused for a little bit here. All right, so hitting it with the dryer just to get those final marks, final paint marks dried really well. Okay, so am I calling it done or am I not quite there? Just want to thank you if you're still hanging out with me and watching this all the way through. I really appreciate it. And remember, give me a thumbs up if you like what you're seeing here and subscribe to my channel so that you can get future videos. There's a bell there to hit, and that sends out notifications to you when I've got a new video to show. Okay, now sharpening some of my pencils. These are Prismacolor pencils. I love the Prismacolor pencils. The quality of the pencils are wonderful. But if you're just getting started, when I was first starting with my mixed media, I was using my daughter's Crayola pencils and her Crayola crayons. So that works too. Use what you got and see if you like it and if you're comfortable with it, and then you can later make other purchases. This teal here that I'm using is one of my favorite. You can tell it's always my shortest pencil. I always like to add a little bit of that color. Notice the flickering, the water just keeps bouncing back into my camera, the light bouncing off of it. So glad I figured that out so that I can fix that for the next time. So making a variety of different marks. My final mark making isn't, it tends to be more intentional, and I'm just adding kind of that final little bit to it so that, you know, when you get up close to it, you can see all these interesting marks that you don't see from a little further away. So my goal is always, you know, artwork that is going to draw you in, and then when you are stepping up closer, you're rewarded with some more interesting marks. This here is a Neocolor 2 crayon that I'm using. So I will be using, you know what, I'm going to pin up above this right now is a video on how I like to varnish my art on paper. I like to seal it first with a fixative spray, and then I like to put down Liquitex varnish. So I'll include a link right above here so that you can check out that video if you're interested in protecting your artwork. And the reason I varnish all my work that I sell is because I want it to last over the years. And by putting down a varnish, I'm going to protect those colors from fading over the years. Now this here, this thicker one is called a Stabilo Woody, and these are fun. They're crayon-like also. They're a bit thicker, and I love using them. And I'm putting them right over those orange marks that I had made earlier. And then back to a Neocolor 2 crayon. So I'm using a lot of water-soluble marks at the end here, so very important that I seal them first before I put down a liquid varnish on them. That protects the marks and keeps them from smudging and moving around. Here's a Stabilo Woody again, a lighter color. Can't wait to get my new table set up so that it's not bouncing around like this. This folding table that I'm using, I have had since, wow, before my daughter was born. So she's 24. So I've had it for like 25 years. It's come in handy all these years, but now I can see it's not so handy when it comes to trying to videotape. I'm looking for, okay, you know what I'm looking for here? My pencil. I couldn't figure out what happened to my pencil. I had misplaced it somewhere, and usually I always have a couple of pencils on hand. So here I am trying to figure out what in the world happened to the pencil. And then I figured out what I did. I actually have it on my other work table. So I got up and went to go grab that because I was cutting out, not these particular ones, but a few other pieces for the next time. Nope. Actually, I'm trying to look for the pencil again, is what it looks like. Now, I should have fast forwarded through this. I didn't realize that I had taken this much time. This I recorded a couple of weeks ago. So I don't always get a chance to watch the whole thing through from start to end before I start recording. I try to catch as much as I can that I can fast forward. All right, well, I've decided that I'm going to use this other colored pencil to sign my piece. There we go. It's a dark one, so I like to sign my pieces with a pencil. And then I decided I didn't like the way I signed it. And this is why I sign with a pencil, is because sometimes I mess up the way I sign. So I did it a second time. So that one's done. And sign this other one. And when I use the fixative spray, it'll cover that so that that doesn't smudge either when I put down the liquid varnish. Okay, and I decided to come back in. I wanted to darken some of those areas that were already dark, but I wanted them to seem kind of painterly, is what I like to call it. So what I do is I put down, this is a Stabilo, um, um, what was I calling these? Oh my goodness, my mind just went blank. But anyway, Stabilo Woody. And so I put down a little bit of that and then I smudge it with my fingers and it looks more like it was painted on because it softens those edges. I love it when I can't think of something. I'm being sarcastic there. Some days it's like it's right there in front of me and I just, at the tip of my tongue, and I just can't think of the word. Those lovely senior moments. Okay, so now, do you like the black? I like the way the black kind of helps these other colors stand out even more. And that's just a regular eraser there. You can erase if you don't like something. And I'm tapping my finger, which tells me there's something I wasn't happy with that I wanted to, yep, here we go. I wanted to lighten it one more time. So going through, this is rare. I rarely, once I do my final mark making, I rarely come back in with paint again. But I think this was just really bugging me. I was feeling like they had faded back too much. I wanted a little bit more brightness to them. I'm trying to figure out, do I want to make a circle in there? All right, well, I did, and I pushed them back a bit by just rubbing them out. And I had some pencil marks, so I used my eraser to remove some pencil marks in there. And that is a Neocolor 2 crayon. Okay, now I think I'm calling it done. I'm giving you the close-ups. Now you can definitely see a lot more of what I was doing. All those yummy layers. And here's the other one. I like the teal kind of half circle towards the bottom and the circle. Just add some interest that way. All right, so that is done. And then I'm going to show you one more thing here before we wrap it up, and that is how I like to sign the back of them. So here I found my pencil. This is one of my daughter's pencils from grade school. Okay, we're going way back. And I like to put the title, my signature, the date, the location, and then my website. All right, done. And the way I like to sell these 5x7s is I mat them out. So matting is free and that is included with your purchase. And then here's the pieces. So thank you again so much for joining me today. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you subscribe and give me a thumbs up. And I am so looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Wishing you a super fabulous day.